of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I will take a motion for the approval of the regular agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I do, and just a quick question. On pages 12 and 13, I noticed that the rural fire and the parks have radios purchased for about $22,000. Are both of those under the public safety grant?
Yeah, so first that shouldn't be under the parks and it has already been moved to the police.
Okay.
That would be that's speaking for them, but I had to get it moved. I'm like, why did I spend $21,000 in the parks and radios? So it's the police and the fire departments.
Okay.
I tried to get him in, but
Okay. Thank you. That's the only question that I have. Anyone else have any questions on the consent agenda? If not, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
so moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. The public is invited to be heard on matters that are not on the agenda. So anyone here in the audience or online, if you have something to address with us that is not on the agenda. Going once? Going twice? All right. There's no public comment. City engineer project updates. Is Chris on the phone with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Chris.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi. Project updates, the 2024 street and utility improvement project is underway. Rain has been a limiting factor for it quite a bit this year. The contractor is still working on Lindale Avenue North, and we'll keep moving along. Unless there's specific questions on that project, I'll just kind of keep moving on to the 2025 project, which is the next item on the agenda.
Yes. Thank you.
RFPs were sent out to 3 geotechnical companies to provide soil borings for the 2025 stream utility improvement project. They were sent to CVT, AET, and Braun Intertech. CVT is Chosen Valley Testing. After receiving proposals from all 3 companies, Chosen Valley Testing was the low proposal of a lump sum fee of $5,000, and this would be provide 6 borings on next year's project, along with a recommendation for the pavement section. You may recall Chosen Valley was also provide these services on the 2024 project, and we've had pretty good success with their work so far. So I do have a recommendation to award this work to Chosen Valley Testing.
Does anyone have any questions? If not, I will take a motion to approve the awarding of business to Chosen Valley Testing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
Next item is a public hearing for the approval of the on-sale intoxicating liquor license and Sunday liquor license for the Rusty Spoke at 329 Main Street West. So at this time, we will hear any public comment. Anyone in the audience or online? Okay. If not, then I will accept a motion to approve the on-sale intoxicating liquor license and Sunday liquor license for the Rusty Spoke.
So moved.
So is this closure, do we need a motion to close the public hearing?
Not generally. It's something Dwayne likes to do, but generally the public hearing can be closed by just the chair of the board announcing that the public hearing is now closed.
And I will so do that. The public hearing is now closed, and then I will entertain a motion to approve the liquor license.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Questions
Yes, please.
before that? The application, is there a separate application document, or is it what we see, the total amount of the application?
As far as the license fees, is that what what you see is what is paid.
So as far as the information provided to the city, that's the document that's signed as an application document?
Correct. Yeah. And it actually goes to, that's the state form that goes to the state, is what you see there. And it's like they're licensed then through the state with, once the city has approved, then the license gets forwarded to the state for licensure.
So I know we did a background check, and then was it documented then that there was no involvement any longer with Ricardo involved in it?
Yes,
Any understanding or any contractual arrangement of any sort? Or lease?
We talked in that, I talked with Lisa about that, and we went through that. If that is a stipulation that the council would wish to engage into part of this agreement, they can do that. In talking with Scott Riggs, that's something that the city can do. But my understanding is that he will not be involved in the business once it opens, is that? That's correct. That's my understanding, and that's what we talked about in email, and we discussed that, so.
I'm just trying to clarify, just to make sure that the eligibility is correct, that there's no lease or tenant arrangement?
Correct. There is not at this point.
So he's not renting an apartment or anything like that?
Nope.
Okay.
Do you want that in the action?
Well, and that's something that the council can decide upon. I think that we can either look at it, and if it's determined that that is happening, we can address it at that time, or we can put it into the approval of this motion in any light that you want to do that. Either way is fine.
I'd rather keep the action already the way we got it, and then turn around, and if there is an additional one, then bring it up.
Yeah, and I think that can be addressed if something happens and we find out that there's something, just like any other, like if we have a violation somewhere or something's happening or someone's patio is not in compliance with what the city agreed to when they gave the, like a temporary patio or a permanent patio, if we find that, the gates are leaving left open or there's things that are happening, we can address those things as they arise, I guess. Certainly you can write it in any light that you would choose according to Scott Riggs, but I guess it would be my recommendation. I want to support our businesses and give them the benefit of the doubt, so I don't see any reason that we shouldn't do that here. But to the same point, I mean, we talked with Lisa, and I said we're going to be very, very clear that if we do find out that is, or Pauline, sorry, I'm sorry. So many times, sorry. I apologize, Pauline, sorry. There were, I mean, I was very clear. I mean, when we talked, I said this is one of my major concerns here because of past, and I think that we were of the same. We're on the same page there, so I don't think there's anything that's not out in the open, and we're very clear that these are the expectations for the license and for you to continue to work and have this license, that he's not going to be involved in this business and not employed at all was kind of our agreement that we had, so.
Which I'm okay with.
Yep. Okay, good.
So the application is under a company name, correct?
Yes.
So is there any other involvement with anyone else as far as board members or anything like that?
No, not just,
You're the sole board
Yep.
owner?
So with the limited liability corporation, is it just not officers and there's not actually a board?
There can be boards.
Okay.
Sure, certainly. And there could be people that are on the board that have no financial
Interest, yeah.
But my understanding, there's no board, there's no other. Financed by me, it's fine. Yeah, no other investors or anything that we determine in the background check, so.
And then this will mature in March. I know it's dated April to March, but it's March.
It'll renew with the others, yep,
Okay,
yep.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So there is a motion on the table and a second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Good luck, Lisa.
Okay. All right, so the next item is the 2025 levy and the budget timeline.
Yes, so I wanted to put this out this year, so hopefully we can, kind of set a schedule of what we're looking at for the future. Generally with these, I kind of lay out how I see this going out. We are, as staff, working on preliminary documents right now. My hope would be in about a month, to get, you all the budget documents, about 2 weeks before what would be our first meeting, but that the meetings this year would kind of happen at during the first meeting of the month, kind of going through after the regular city council meeting. So we'll probably try to shorten up the first meeting of the month so that we don't have an extra long meeting, and try to balance those meetings going out, but in a way to create less overall meetings. I did also put a few potential optional budget workshops in there if we need to. And then in the bolded stuff, kind of put the meetings that I expect deadlines to be hit. Those aren't hard and fast. They are occurring before actual deadlines, but if we didn't want them to happen on that, for example, the not to exceed levy is usually due the 31st or 30th. However many days there are in September, it's due on that day. And that would just be the last city council meeting before that.
Okay.
So really, I'm just trying to get everybody rolling into this, so hopefully we're kind of on the same schedule and eliminate special meetings if at all possible.
Okay. I think the only potential conflict that I have on the schedule is September 3rd, because that's the week of Labor Day,
Yes.
and we are usually gone that week. So otherwise,
And I'll probably be out the 5th of August,
Okay.
just in case there's not a quorum.
And yeah, we can certainly move these around, or like I said, if some of these, like especially early on, if you've got questions, you can get those to me well in advance so that we can get those answered. And obviously, we can, if these don't work, we can certainly move off of them too. But just kind of a general framework moving into the budget season.
I have a few comments, I guess. And I still kept a copy of the League of Minnesota Cities suggested budget process.
Yep.
And so I look at that, or for comparison's sake, and the first item they have is just a review of capital improvement projects, at least going out and looking at the next year to 30 years, and to shore those up or see if there's any revisions. And I'm assuming that you do that before you start the budget, or we should talk about that if there's any major differences and things, and that's what they suggest as a starting point.
Yeah.
So it might be done without saying, but I know last year it was kind of like we had some end of the year discussions about things.
Yeah,
Like
so
in the golf board and things like that.
yeah, so I would say I kind of foresee this evolving even into next year. Robin and I have been kind of working on even a slightly longer version of this. I know that trying to get a long-term financial plan into place, that's something I'm struggling with, of where we should look at approving that, only in that if we approve it with the budget, then you're kind of having to wait for all your budget numbers to fall into place, or do you approve it before the budget? That way you can use it to work into that. Where I ultimately foresee, because I'm foreseeing the long-term financial plan, at least its first iteration, kind of getting approved during this budget cycle, and then starting to look at that usually yearly in the spring time, and then move into the CIP stuff maybe early summer, so that way by the time we get into August, we've kind of looked at that stuff, so we were all on the same page with it moving into the budget. So to answer your question about CIP stuff, yes, I see, hopefully by next year, we'll be addressing that about right now. So that way it helps kind of inform and put budgets together as we move.
Yeah, I hope that everyone's looking at the CIP stuff like now to make sure that the numbers that we put in the year before for next year, because we're projecting 2 years in advance, is still good and that we're not, are there opportunities to push it off if need be, or the condition doesn't warrant a replacement, or?
Yeah, and
I
that's
think
where.
the city does a good job in the capital area, so I'm
Yep.
not criticizing that at all, but just to make sure we're looking at it sooner before the budget than during or after it.
Yeah, so
Because these are big lumpy things that kind of come and we have to look at.
yeah, staff's been reviewing CIP stuff for a few weeks now.
Okay. Secondly, I know they suggest goal setting or at least discussions, and sometimes I think we get hung up as a council in the budget process by talking about different either goals or initiatives or something we're working on as we're doing the budget kind of thing. Instead of having the goals and that discussions first and then it just flows through the budget. I think we're much better at that because now we have the planning, strategic planning document. So that maybe just a quick review. Are these still the priorities that we want to hit next year before we get too far into things? So we're not arguing something in November that we should have agreed to already in July or something.
So you're
But just,
talking like the visioning document
Yeah, some
that
of
we
those
have
things.
and-
I mean, if we said we're gonna do this, then it shouldn't be a big surprise that it's in the budget, kind of thing. So I don't know if there's opportunities to look at that or that type of thing. But also, in the big picture items where the council's responsible for the personnel policy, and as an example, that somewhere that we should have a discussion about compensation changes and things like that earlier on, instead of having to kind of fight the wind or row upstream about the bigger numbers about salary or compensation changes, not individual things, but just a bigger picture. Where are we comfortable, so we're not arguing about that all the way through December 1st, kind of thing. And I know we have strong feelings about that. So if we could get a better cohesiveness about that earlier in the process, we're not. And sometimes I think the city administrators, not just you, but in the past, you put a number there, and then we have to kind of argue on both sides of whatever that number you choose to put in there. And I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it or not. I don't have the answer necessarily, but that's a topic maybe we should think about. Maybe agreeing upon what the big picture percentage is beforehand. And lastly, or at least the other thing that comes to mind when I look at this is presentation of enterprise funds in November 18th. I think that's okay, except for the golf course. I think the golf course, last year it really got muddied up in my mind because we didn't even approve the contract until January for our person, I think. But I'm not sure why we can't get that sooner.
I agree.
And it should, and that's a different kind of enterprise fund in my mind because it doesn't really float or it doesn't break even. And we have a history of having to help it, and we've had a history of having to support a big loss in it. So to me, there's a different financial risk with it, and that's why we should look at it sooner instead of having to kind of wait till the very end and kind of have to argue backwards and then be faced with a December kind of deadline for it. And so I know that, it's a seasonal business, so there's some challenges with that. But certainly, we can look at drafts before and they can be adjusted. So I think that one should be moved up to either October or the first meeting in November. The other ones, the ambulance fund, it doesn't really matter. I'm not sure what the other sewer fund.
I see,
not
we have
exciting.
wastewater, water, and
Yeah.
electric, that are the other big ones.
Don't want to berate them, but they're kind of boring anyway, so, but,
As long as stuff's flowing, people don't seem to care.
yeah, but, they're different kind of funds in my mind, but the fitness center and the golf are two kind of retail operations that have different financial risk to us. So in the fitness center, we should be seeing that now, right?
They've given us preliminary numbers, I guess, for the coming year at this point. I know it seems like the last few years they've given us preliminary numbers and then they revise their budget like 6 months in. So we may shoot a little bit higher than their preliminary numbers this year just to make sure that we're not overtopping ourselves.
When does Sandy generally have the final numbers, because their fiscal year ends June 31st?
Yep, so their fiscal year ends here at the end of the month, and so they'll have their final numbers for, well, yeah, I mean, I think their budget approvals are any time now, and so we should be able to get their, I'll call them preliminary, because like I said, the last few years, they've revised their budget halfway through, but.
And then I kind of, I kind of think that they're trying to give us a hint about the comments. I think it's done twice here. Once a preliminary decision has been made on budget topic, staff will not plan to bring that topic back for discussion.
So,
You're trying to tell us something?
So I think one of them that you hit on, big picture decisions you kind of hit on earlier. So for example, if we go, okay, this is kind of where we preliminarily agree that maybe we'll look at doing for compensation for next year. If we are miraculously able to figure that out on August 5th, it's not something that I plan on bringing back on September 3rd, October 7th, November 18th and saying, okay, this is where we landed. Now do we want to have a discussion on this? Or to see if we're all still good on it. Not that we can't talk about it, but the hope would be that throughout this process, the presentation of the budget is not the same. If we have 4 meetings, the presentation of the budget won't be the same throughout the 4 meetings. I would want to break it down so that each meeting we kind of have an agenda topic or list of things that staff would like some sort of preliminary approval on so that we can continue to move the budget process forward throughout, instead of always presenting the entire budget, going through the entire budget, and then backtracking and doing the same thing over and over again. I'm trying to create a more systematic approach of kind of assembling the budget, if that makes sense.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you providing this now and talking about it now, so I think it's all helpful. Some of the things that you gave us some more graphs and different information last year that I appreciated, and I would like to see that again as far as the salary changes year to year.
Yeah.
And the one thing I don't know that we had time for, but to actually project those numbers in, what does the budget show? If we're looking at the budget number, what is the percentage increase from last year to the budget? And I totally understand there's could be big variations from year to year because we might not have positions filled and things like that. But over time, to understand, are we growing it with our peers? Are we growing it with our size of our community and all those things? So we have benchmarks to look at and things like that.
Are you practicing being?
I
like to think you're putting an exclamation on the word benchmarks.
Small answer following me everywhere, it seems.
Okay.
So I appreciate that kind of extra information, and if we could, I'm a believer in trying to look at ourselves and kind of judge ourselves how we're doing, and do the changes make sense that we're doing.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this? I'm not really looking for a approval at this point, more of a see if you guys just have questions or comments on this schedule, or if anything glaringly doesn't work, like you don't want to meet more than once, or you want to meet 12 times.
I guess last thing I'll say.
Yeah.
This year is different because we have to wrestle with just how we ended last year, and just so we have a good discussion or an agreement on how we're starting out looking at the budget.
Okay.
How are we capturing, do we need to do catch-up, or how are we doing that catch-up part of it?
Kind of figured that'd be our very first discussion this year.
Great.
Any other comments, questions? Are you looking for a motion, Josh?
I am not.
Okay, all right. So we'll just kind of work with this timeline and adjust
Yeah,
accordingly.
I'll say we'll tentatively schedule for August 5th, but I'll certainly bring it up in the next couple meetings. That way if something doesn't work. But hopefully whenever we do it, I would like to have that first packet to you 2 weeks in advance so you all have time to digest it.
Sounds good. All right. Next item is miscellaneous. If there's any questions about the meeting minutes for the park, the EDA, scale, or any discussion items that are not on the agenda.
So I did want to bring up real quick, I included the site analysis and fit study for the Scale RTF building. A conversation's been happening kind of since I got here, but over the last few months especially, it started to ramp up on the RTF board. The RTF board is made up of generally staff members from each of the member communities of the regional training facility. And recently, there have been a few members that have either left or announced that they were leaving. And some of the remaining members have basically stated that the building in its current makeup, well, it's kind of falling apart, quite frankly. That something kind of needs to be done to keep the building in a habitable state if it's gonna remain, or potentially looking at something else. So Scale, as an organization, paid for a study to say, okay, if we take the wish list of all the various member organizations of what they would want in a training facility across the spectrum, police, fire, and the likes, what are all those things? And then would the current site be able to handle it? And what would the potential cost be? So that is the study that's in your packet here, ranging everywhere from purchasing an adjoining property that's currently being marketed so that there's more space, to trying to fit into current space, from renovating the existing facilities to knocking everything down and building new. What that would be. It does have an enormous price tag as you roll down through it. At this point, obviously, no decisions have been made. That would need to come back to you. Right now, it seems to be the general agreement of the committee to look into breaking down these costs even far further. I know there are probably some communities, if you're used to paying $8,000 a year and some sort of new facility renovations or builds spikes your cost to $60,000 a year, maybe you're not interested in being a member of the ERTF anymore. So that's kind of the next step that they're looking at of, well, how exactly would each community be affected by these costs? What sort of revenues might you see back by having these new facilities? Because there are communities all across Minnesota looking at places to train. And so there are certainly additional revenues that are the current facilities realizing that a potential new facility would also realize. So this is more just for your guys' information to know that the powers at be are considering existing facilities, but that more conversations will certainly be had between myself, Tim, Steve, and you all as to what continues to make sense for the city of New Prague in terms of this facility and or being a part of the regional training facility group.
Well, it'd be nice for some more information, simply because, you know, when we go to design the police station, do we need a training room or don't we need a training room? If you're gonna put a new training room in here, then why, you know, put it in here? You see what I'm saying?
And
So
no,
more
yeah.
information would be great.
And that is what we are in the information gathering phase right now. So
I'd like a hard copy of that too, if I could, but can you tell me who's on the committee?
yeah, so for New Prague, I am the main sitter, and I believe Tim is my backup. Though I always go, so Tim never has to go. And then trying to dig down. I believe Savage is on there, Prior Lake is on there, Jordan, Elko, New Market, Belle Plaine, Scott County. Carver County recently stepped off. They had been on. They stepped off, but they still rent time back for all the time that they were gone. So I don't know if that works out cost financially for them. Shakopee is currently on, though they have expressed potentially not being on in the future. They're still working through that conversation themselves.
So this just wasn't Scott County, this was a joint, there was some Wright County involved in, Carver and,
Yeah, so Carver was the other big county that was on it in the
or
beginning.
Carver County?
Yeah,
excuse me,
but yeah, Carver County, I believe, just recently, they officially parted ways. They've been talking about that for a few years.
So the burden now will fall on just about the Scott County taxpayers by themselves.
That is correct. So I know with this potential project as well, they, the last time they did a major renovation, I believe, was 15 or 20 years ago over there, and they did receive a pretty decent amount of state funding for it. So, Scott County scale really is working those channels to see is there state money available, federal money available. Because yes, if it came down to it right now, if you look at just members, it's all Scott County. Between the county and whatnot, though, like I said, they've gotten over the last year, they've put new software in for like organizing signups and whatnot, and they are actually seeing quite a bit of additional revenue to kind of updating all that from outside organizations coming down to use the space, because I know there's a few of them in the cities, but those spaces, and Tim probably knows them better than I do, but those spaces fill up like that. And so there's people all over looking to use these sorts of facilities, and so it would realize additional revenue outside of just member dues, if that makes sense. Kind of like the golf course. You get your members, which is like we know that this is the revenue we're getting in, but a lot of the golf course's revenues come from non-members coming and using the facility.
So I'm just curious, you mentioned the city of Savage had some people, I mean, city administrators or police chiefs, or is there any elected officials in this?
The
Even the
RTF.
county commissioners?
Yep, so there are a couple county commissioners that attend every single meeting. But the cities generally have all appointed either the city administrator or a police chief. Seems to be the two big parties that join, or are the acting people on these boards, and then we will bring information back to you, such as when big stuff like this starts happening.
You said there's a few county commissioners that go to every meeting?
Correct.
Can you tell me who those would be?
John Ulrich, I think, has attended every meeting since I've been there. I'm trying to think, there's another one that pops in and out occasionally.
Tom?
I don't believe it's Tom. I'll have to look. I'll go back in those minutes and certainly get you that information. I know John Ulrich has been at every single one of them.
I didn't look at it thoroughly, but maybe it's in here, but a better understanding of what it is all used for and by, because I get the sense that Scott County is using it for programming to a certain degree. I see juvenile something or other in here, so I'm assuming that's a Scott County program?
Yeah, so that juvenile facility actually is just next to the existing site. The reason why it's in here is the county has had conversations about moving the programming out of that facility, which would free up the space for that facility for use by the RTF if it decided it needed the extra space. But generally, the facility is used by the police departments and fire departments from across the county for training their people.
So understanding what percentage does New Prague use it of its total? And how much of its capacity is being used? Is it used 60% of the time, 80% of the time?
Yeah, I don't have that exact data off.
What kind of data do they have as far as usage and who's using it and that type of thing? But is there other programming that's coming into it that's not municipal city type?
Yeah, so I mean, I do know some of I know the Boy Scouts are a group that uses it, and they actually like the Boy Scouts using it because they tend to use it at night when no one else uses it. But yeah, I can certainly get some more data on just who exactly is using it and how much they're using it and that sort of thing.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then I'll just go around the room. Steve, Renda, do you have anything? Okay. Matt? Nothing. Chief? No more. Josh?
Nothing else.
Sean?
Two things. One, normally this would probably fall to Ken, but the weed situation over at the mill, I mean, it looks horrible.
Over at the mill?
Yeah, I mean, they're 2 feet tall. I don't know if a letter can be sent or something to get that cleaned up.
Yeah, usually we're pretty good about tracking that stuff down, so I'll see where that's at in the process.
Okay, well, just, it's.
Yep.
With the things going on at the bras and whatnot, and they gotta look at that across, it just doesn't speak well for the city. And then second of all, I had a contractor, that does a lot of local work. He brought up, there's been, the situation that I had, and he wanted me to look into it, and I don't know if, Matt, this would fall under you, or if this would be Ken too, but local contractor, some parts didn't arrive to some, so he wanted to move a guy up on the schedule and do it, but he hadn't filled out the permit paperwork yet, and, which in the past had never been, you can do that online, but he just wanted to fill his day, that when his schedule got changed. So he didn't have the paperwork, and then there was some additional add-on fine, for doing the work and then completing the application, even though it was within a few hours. And he had heard from another contract too, that I don't know if it was the building official or whomever, somebody in the city though was issuing these fines, and brought it up and there used to be a little bit more customer service involved with that. I understand that it's important to have the permits and they can't be sitting out there forever, but I would just think that we could find a better way and not penalize these guys just because some parts didn't arrive at their scheduled day that, in the afternoon, so they'd freed up and he was able to move something that was gonna be a week out up.
Yeah.
Without getting assessed an additional fine. 'Cause
Yeah,
that
so-
happens quite a bit from my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, so like you said, these permits are generally important that we issue, and that's why we issue them. And I know generally if somebody does work without a permit, then that is where the fine comes in, whether the permit's applied for 4 hours after the work's done, or we never hear from them and catch them 6 months later and say, hey, what happened here? There was no permit ever pulled for this work. I think the tough part I certainly feel for people that, are trying to fill their day because they're trying to get their work done just like everybody else. I think you do run into a slightly sticky situation of, well, how without getting the permit before the work is done, where's that cutoff to where the fine should come in at? I think if somebody comes in right after the work is done that day, is that okay? If they come in the next morning because they couldn't come in right after, and so I understand wanting to work with people, I certainly do, but I think you run into a tricky situation of why'd you give this guy some leeway and not this guy?
No, I understand. It just sounds like all of a sudden there's been this change where that used to be pretty commonplace and there was some understanding there, and now all of a sudden, and it was brought up to my attention. I said, I really don't know a whole lot about it.
I can
I
certainly.
would hope that our city is working with our local contractors, and then I only spoke with this person, but he said he was speaking on behalf of two others too that ran into the same situation.
I'll certainly bring it up to Ken. I would guess if it's being done this way, it's because it's just the most fair way that you can treat everybody the same, and everyone kind of falls under the same umbrella of rules at that point.
Well, then I don't know, maybe we could address the fine issue. I don't know what that fine specifically was, but maybe it doesn't have to be so deep of a fine. I'd like to look at it.
But like I said, we also deal with quite a few people who never pull permits, and we find out on our own 6 months later.
I understand. I know, it's a slippery slope. I
Yep.
told him I'd bring it up, and I would just hope that
Yeah.
our building officials would work with them, that they do a lot of work around town, and it just seems very punitive, would be my thought process on it, and if, maybe we should, I don't know what the fee schedule said, but apparently that has gone up over the last year as well, and that's probably true, because I know we readjusted a lot of our fee schedules, but, anyways, I told him I'd pass it on if you guys could take a look at it.
Yep,
I
I
mean,
will
obviously, contractors are talking about it, and again, we wanna be a city that likes to work with our local businessmen, so. That was it, those two things, that and the weed situation at the mill.
Okay.
Bruce?
I wanted to ask more about the liquor application. When I'm looking at it, this particular application or request spurred a lot more due diligence, let's say, on it. But as I look at the document, if this is the documents that we're having people sign, I don't see an actual application document that's being used. And I looked at the liquor, the state page in the suggested application form they have, which authorizes the background check as well, is much bigger. And the document that we have here isn't actually an application, it's the certification that the city provides the state. So I don't see anything, if this is the documents we're using, any document that's actually requiring the applicant to certify and attest that the statements that they're making are true and correct and that they could be liable for. So if someone were to misrepresent something, we're certifying to the state that this information is all true, but we don't have anything to fall back on because we don't have a document that the applicant has signed stating that the information is true and correct. So that, it just seems like maybe we should revisit how we're doing this a little bit. And if we're getting applicants that are applying as businesses like this one is, the state form, the suggested example anyway, if I'm looking at the right one, digs deeper into, you know, financial information, board members and things like that, which is probably appropriate, you know, because a lot of people won't say, well, my brother is 5% owner of this. They might not tell you that. But the form asks those kind of questions. Does anyone have an interest in it that's other than ownership interest, that kind of stuff? And we probably never have run into situations like that until this is probably the more recent example. But to me, that's where I think we have a hole in the process a little bit.
So there is in state statute, there are your guidelines to be licensed, right? And our city code follows the state statute for those, which is in here. So part of the background check is going through each one of those subdivisions of that statute. And
Right, I
making
looked at
sure
the
that they're-
subdivision, so I'm familiar with that.
Yep,
And that's the information that we have to attest and certify to.
right.
But that's us certifying to the state that we're following the state statutes and whatnot. But what's our recourse against the applicant? They have a suggested application form, but we're not using it. But
So
at
when they're
least there's one
issued,
in the form anyway, but.
yeah, so when they're issued a liquor license to the state also has an enforcement section.
Okay.
So if we find out that something isn't in fact accurate in their application, the state would come down and actually assist us in the investigation, and they could revoke or suspend or whatever they need to do with their license as well. The city could take then additional or action as far as a fine, suspension, revocation, whatever that looks like, and so could the state.
What's our ability without the state of having recourse against the applicant? I'm not seeing that transportation in the documentation.
We have the ability to, like, if there's an alcohol violation, like if there's a sale, you know.
On the
underage
application
sale.
process, I mean.
The application process?
Yeah.
Well, we are going off of the state recommendations, following the
Okay.
state statute. So the state provides them a license based on these, the statute and their application. So that's been the current practice with liquor licenses in Minnesota. Normally, cities aren't more restrictive than the state. So that's why cities have used the state application, because it's a pretty, they follow the statute.
But we're not using the state application. This isn't an application form. This is our certification form.
Right, yeah, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
The customer is
Was-
not signing this anymore.
So what's being presented to us is a certification, but not the actual application.
That's why I thought maybe you had another form that you have them sign.
Well, there's
Because,
there's the state of Minnesota license applicant information. Right, I'm looking at page 68.
Right, and that's dealing with workers' compensation. No, okay, license application information.
So this information is used to deny the issuance, renewal, or transfer of your liquor license to the Minnesota Department of Revenue.
I suppose you could call that an application because it does say applicant, but it doesn't really give them there's no attestation, like I attest this to be true and accurate and financial representations and all that kind of stuff. I don't see any of that documentation in there. And that's why I would maybe encourage you to look at this and see there is application forms that the state has on their site, and they're very extensive. And maybe that's way too broad for what we want to use or need. And it does get into more personal information that we can't, there's privacy issues that we have to follow too. But I dealt with contracts a lot in my lifetime, so I've been in court enough times to know that what's transportation legally, that we can go back after somebody if they said something that's not accurate to us. So they could hide something and we miss in the background check because they had their middle name wrong or something, or middle initial was different, or they used their confirmation name or something, whatever. We don't have any recourse. That's what I'm trying to get at. And maybe if our attorney looked at it, they say, well, this is fine, you don't need to do it. But I run into this corporate issue here where I've dealt with corporations enough to know that there's other interests involved in it that could be. That, do we do a background check on the board members? Is there a board member? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's part of when we do the background check. We didn't identify any other board members or any other investors or anything. If there is more than a certain percentage of investment, then you do the background check into that, the other investors too.
Right.
This is what's required by the state. So this form here on page 66 is at the top, it says the cities are required by law to complete and sign this form to certify the issuance of the following liquor license type. So again, going back to that statute, that's how we do the background check.
Right, the city is signing that. The city, but not the customer. So if the other application is an example, said, okay, list the owners of the company. Now, in this case, she's the sole owner, but there could have been 5 or 6 different owners, and we have to do background checks on each one of them.
Right.
Or there could have been 5 or 6 board members, maybe they didn't own any, but she has to list them all. She has to list everybody that has more than 5% owner by name and social security number and all that stuff, so you can do the background check. And then she has to attest that she's not lying about it. But that's where maybe a more thorough application would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, we'll certainly look into that.
It just, this is just we kind of walked through a real life example of a case of a misrepresentation of individuals and how they operate. So if we want to tighten up a little bit, this might be an opportunity to do it.
Thank you, Bruce.
The other, I tried to apply for this bike grant, the computer blew up at the state, but I noticed when you apply for it, there's a disclosure for Tennyson disclosure or something like that. And I'm not sure, when I looked at that, if we don't have to provide that same disclosure, maybe that's what this is. But I noticed on the alcohol site, it also had that Tennyson disclosure, just to make sure that if we have to provide that, we're doing that. It's similar to what the wording is here, but I didn't know if it captures the whole requirement of that, dealing with privacy and our ability to give that information to the authorities if they so ask for it. That's all I had.
Thank you, Bruce. Rick?
Is today Ken's day off, or is he off for all week?
Who?
Ken,
Ken will be back on Thursday.
be back on Thursday. I got 2 questions and I'll bring them up to him.
Okay. Yeah, as a reminder, City Hall is closed on Wednesday for celebration of Juneteenth. But yes, Ken will be back on Thursday.
Cool. I'm done.
I don't have anything, so if
Move to
there's
adjourn?
nothing else, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn, please?
In a second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank
I'm
you.
I'm not used to you running the meeting. It was supposed to be a, who's gonna jump it first?